originate from the thymus. That's why they're nicknamed or called T cells. T is from thymus. Without a thymus, you don't have T cells.
Dr. Maricini suggested that the CD3 test that you ordered to be done in this case does not conclusively rule out the possibility of DeGeorge disease. Was that accurate or not?
No, that was inaccurate. She's got normal numbers of T cells and where they're supposed to be.
And does that rule out the possibility of DeGeorge or partial DeGeorge?
It rules out both of them. She does not have DeGeorge syndrome or partial DeGeorge, and she doesn't have all the other changes you're supposed to see.
All right, and do you have any doubt as to the cause of death being malnutrition?
No, none whatsoever. And even on the death certificate, he was saying that I was kind of vague or something like that, but on the front page of the death certificate, I've got malnutrition as a cause of death, and under how incident occurred, I said fed an inadequate diet. So I addressed that.
Was the autopsy report filled out inappropriately?
No, not at all. The autopsy too, and I mean, it's not just the report. We have a tremendous number of records and papers and reports that go into the case file itself. The autopsy report itself is just one small part.
Now, Dr. Maricini made certain comments about the death certificate. What, if anything, can you tell us about the death certificate in light of his comments?
Where he said that I wrote malnutrition under cause of death, but didn't support it with anything else. But there's another section on the death certificate as to how incident occurred. And I wrote fed an inadequate diet, and that explains the malnutrition. So I've addressed that issue on the death certificate.
So did you also accurately fill out the death certificate?
I filled it out and I signed it.
All right. And it was done appropriately?
Oh, yeah.
That's all I have.
If it was inappropriate, the state would have sent it back to me.
Okay.
No further questions.
Mr. Rubin, cross-examination.
Thank you. Can I give back some of these blankets?
Sure.
I'm better. Doctor, the last thing that you said was, in your opinion, having signed the death certificate,
Yes,
baby Warrior was fed an inadequate diet.
correct.
What was she fed?
She was fed wheatgrass and vegetables, coconut milk. It's not an adequate diet for a child of that age. What she needed was breast milk or formula or a combination of both. In general, there's not enough protein or calories in the diet that she's getting to sustain life.
Supposing the mother made her own formula made up of many more ingredients than you've just recited, would that change your opinion? If it turns out that there were many more ingredients, and we will list them for you, would that change your opinion that the child was fed an inadequate diet?
No, she needed breast milk or formula. And I already have the recipes and the samples that were made up for, I want to keep saying cooked because I know it wasn't cooked. The mother prepared meals for me and had them delivered through the dependency courts to my office.
And what did you do with them?
Had them tested for toxicological examination, and based on the knowledge I do have in nutrition, the foods that were there are poor, deficient, lacking in proteins and calories.
Did you do a nutritional analysis of what the mother gave you?
What is then it depends on what a nutritional analysis is. I have enough knowledge to know that grass and coconut milk and avocados is not enough to sustain this child's life.
How did you know what was in the bottle that the mother provided to your office?
It was told to me. There's avocado. I love to cook. I know what avocados taste like. There are tomatoes.
And you smelled it, right?
I smelled it, yeah.
And it smelled delicious, you said.
Oh, I wanted to dip into it.
Right. Okay.
But you know, I like potato chips too, and if I ate those for 2 months, I wouldn't be around either.
All right, we're getting a ton of emails, and he's reading them all, and he's going to take them back home with him, too. Court TV souvenirs. And we've got an email here from Phil from Maryland, who said, were you picked to prosecute this case because you are a vegan yourself?
Well, that's an interesting question, and the answer is the case was initially assigned to a prosecutor in the child sex bat unit. That prosecutor knew or found out that I was a vegan and that there were vegan issues in this trial. So she approached me and asked me to become involved with her in becoming involved in preparation for the defense case and the like. She became too involved in a number of other baby homicides that were going on at the same time. So the case was reassigned to me since I knew the case because I had worked with her when it was assigned to her and because I knew the vegan lifestyle. So it was a perfect fit for me.
All right, and then it's a great follow-up question here from Lillian in Charlotte, North Carolina. Mr. Walker, I understand that you are on the same diet. If so, would you place your child on a vegan diet? If so, why? If not, why?
All right, well, Lillian, I would not under any circumstances, if I were married with children, I would under no circumstances allow my child to be fed a raw food diet, particularly a child 3 months, 4 months, 6 months old, because there just is not enough support for the proposition that a raw food diet is appropriate for a newborn or for a 6-month-old or even for a 1-year-old. Now, I know that there are people that might suggest that, all right, for 2 years old, 3 years old, it might be okay. I wouldn't take that chance with my children. I'm a vegan and have been for a while. But I wouldn't run the risk because once you have that child, you may have other children, but you're never going to have that same child again. And I wouldn't do anything that would jeopardize their health. And I believe, personally, that that would be a dramatic health risk, and I wouldn't be willing to take it.
That's why, in good conscience, when you tried to offer some kind of early disposition to the case, a resolution to the charges, you said, look, you can follow the diet yourselves to the parents, to the defendants, but there needs to be a modification for the children. We have another question here from Eric from Columbia, South Carolina. Why was the child's weight at birth never revealed during the trial? Because Mr. Rubin has come on and said, they weren't able to prove it. They didn't say how much the baby weighed, at birth because the facts showed what the weight was of the baby at death, and we knew that, but we didn't get a firm answer in terms of what she weighed at the time she was born.
Sure, that's a great question. We knew what the baby's weight was at the time of birth because Lemoy Andreessen told the police that the weight of the baby was about 7 pounds. So at the time of her death, she weighed less than 7 pounds. So we know that she lost weight over the course of the 6 months. We weren't able to introduce that information because the defense team had filed a motion to suppress to preclude the state from introducing statements that were made to the police officers based upon circumstances surrounding the original visit to the home. So the state could not introduce that information,
Well, it's
Kimberly.
interesting because then he came on the show and then criticized the fact that you didn't introduce that evidence, but in fact, he made the motion to suppress it.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
it's tricky.
I would also point out that we also obtained all of the medical records available from the Department of Health, and there were no documents that related to the weight of the baby at birth. And the reason for that is that Joseph Andreessen, the husband, who has no training in medicine, is the one who delivered baby Woya. It wasn't born. She was not born in a hospital,
Right. It was a home
and
birth, yeah.
so there was no opportunity to get medical records from the hospital that delivered the
And then
child.
no pediatrician medical records because they didn't bring the baby in to
Right.
see the doctor, which also is part of the reason the baby died.
These children were basically sheltered away from the rest of the world. They were not allowed to go to public school. They were not allowed to go to the doctor. They were not allowed to eat at family gatherings, such as Thanksgiving, because the parents did not believe in the eating of cooked foods or non-raw vegan food.
Well, tomorrow is Thanksgiving, but will the Andreessen children be able to partake in this food-driven holiday? Welcome back to Both Sides. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle Newsome. All of the Andreessen children were born at home, and 6 years before Woya's death, the Andreessens all gradually progressed into the vegan lifestyle. Now, while some witnesses have testified that the children looked like they were starving, the defense says malnutrition did not kill baby Woya. They say it was a birth defect. And on the stand now is the medical examiner being cross-examined by the defense. Did he find signs of any birth defects? Let's listen.
I mean, I can rely on it, but I can't tell you what it was.
Right.
I can, if you want to
Did
hear
you
it, I
ever
can.
find out directly from the parents or some other member of the family as to what the baby's weight was when she was being breastfed?
No, I got the weight through somebody else, which is hearsay.
All right? Did you find out as part of your investigation that the baby that was born just before Woya, what's her name, Raya?
I think so. I saw her on the videotape, the
Right.
4-year-old.
Yeah, there were,
Yeah,
no,
I s-
no, the 4-year, I
Or the
believe
squishy
it's an
6-year-old.
18-month-old baby girl.
Okay, she was not on the tape.
Okay. Did you learn that the mother stopped breastfeeding her at about the same time that she stopped breastfeeding Woya?
No, actually, from what I recall, she stopped breastfeeding her at a later date. Woya, of all the kids, was the one who was, she stopped breastfeeding on the youngest, on the shortest date. So Woya's the one she cut off at the earliest out of all the children. That's what I had been told. But again, that's hearsay.
Did that child, Raya, have any of the clinical signs or findings of Woya?
I didn't examine her.
But you received reports from the child protection team who did examine her, right?
Well, let me go look at the file then.
Yeah, go ahead. Did not the mother stop breastfeeding the little girl, Raya, at about the same time that she stopped breastfeeding Woya?
What I have to do is refer to the report that we were just looking at together. This is a,
Yeah, but don't read from it, just refresh your memory.
well, to refresh my memory was that Woya was the one weaned at the youngest age. But I will look at this document that you've asked me to look at.
At what age was Raya weaned away from the breast?
The 4-month baby is on the raw food diet.
Okay.
There's a
stop,
certain-
Stop, please. So
You guys get behind the microphone again.
Oh, yeah.
You guys stay over there.
So Raya, we assume from that report, was 4 months old when she was taken off the breast, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And she was fed a formula by the mother, was she not? I don't think you have to look at that report.
I mean, she's feeding something, yeah.
Okay.
The raw
Doctor,
food
put the
diet.
report down and let's talk, okay?
If he needs to look at the report.
Well, if he needs to.
If he
but I
needs,
think-
he can
If I
look.
need to, I will refer to
Okay, I
it.
think he's going to ask another area of questions. Go ahead.
Okay. Do you know what the formula was for Raya when she was taken off breastfeeding?
No, it just says raw food diet.
All right. Did Raya die?
No.
Is she alive and well?
I don't know if she's well, she's alive.
Okay.
My understanding from photographs I saw, she was not well when Woya died.
How is she now?
My understanding, she's doing well.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that she was doing well when she was being breastfed and then put on the formula?
You mean when?
When she was 4 months old and was put on the formula?
No.
Oh, she wasn't doing well.
It says so in the report that you just asked me to refer to.
Okay.
She's not doing well.
Okay.
And you cut me off, I wasn't allowed to read any further.
So you got it in anyway. Congratulations.
Come on, we don't need that. Come on.
Okay, I'll ask you again. Woya lost weight, you said. She was fed an inadequate diet. And that led to malnutrition.
Correct.
And I asked you what was in the diet, and you don't know. Right?
I have 3 samples of the diet that she
Right.
has.
Which
The
you never
grass.
tested.
I didn't feel I needed to test. I know enough about food that a child Woya's age can't live off of that stuff.
If you don't need to test anything before you, when considering the manner and cause of death, why do you do an autopsy?
To try to rule out other causes of death.
Okay, and you
It's
tried
part of the
to,
investigation.
what did you try to rule out except malnutrition?
Anything that I could find on her.
All right, sounds like a thorough examination. And let's bring in Dean Rosado again to talk about the neglect with respect to the other 4 surviving children.
Yeah, I think that we haven't touched upon that. We've been concentrating on baby Woya, but there's a real interesting kind of play. What kind of helps the baby Woya's case kind of hurts their counts, the other counts that relate to the other children. I mean, one thing they have in their favor, the defendants, is that the other children did live. And so the jury, again, in their common sense, will say they all got the same diet. Well, why did baby Woya die and the others didn't? Again, going to that other cause, perhaps. But these children are fed this diet, and they are not doing well, right, in terms of health. And that criminal neglect statute doesn't seem to require very much. And then not only were they underweight, did they have clinical showings of rickets, but these children never went to the doctor. And I think that also compounding it, they never went to school, they never went to the doctor, will really be compounding the case against the parents. And I think in the jury's mind say, you know, any parent at least at some point will take the children to the doctor. In the New Jersey case, that was very key in terms of the children who were starving there.
See, that's a very important issue. And yes, there are 4 other surviving children that these parents have been accused of committing crimes against, Herb. And, you know, Professor Rosado brings up a great point here in that, you know, these are pretty obvious, clear-cut cases. These children were not within the appropriate percentile in terms of their body weight. They clearly were suffering from malnutrition as well. So how did you go about approaching this aspect of the case?
All right, well, to underscore your point, not only were they not in the appropriate body weight, they were smaller than 999 out of every 1,000 children their age in the United States of America. The question that was raised by the dean is a good one. Why didn't the other children die? The answer to that is a simple one. They didn't start the raw food vegan diet full force until these children were much older. Baby Woya didn't have the advantage of getting a jump start on life on regular food or real food or non-raw fruits and vegetables that the other children did. But keep in mind, the other 4 children all suffered severe malnutrition, and in the case of one of them, rickets. Had the children not been removed from the home, quite possibly we would be talking about more than just 1 autopsy report for baby Woya. We might be talking about 5.
Now, Mr. Rubin made the point yesterday that the baby girl before Woya, her sister, was weaned at the same time of life that Woya was, and that she was fine, and so therefore they would have had no indication to think whatsoever that there was anything wrong with baby Woya, because same time they're weaned, that they appeared the same in terms of their physical appearance.
Well, with regards to the time of the weaning of the other child, we have to take the defendant's word for it. And
Right.
why would they give information that will be helpful to the state that's trying to prosecute them? That's one. But even if that other child was weaned at that time, that child received other foods other than wheatgrass juice and coconut water and almond milk, which isn't milk at all. Really, it's almonds blanched in warm water, and whatever oils are suffused through the skin of the almond in the water, that's put in a bottle and given to the child. None of those things have what we talked about earlier, macronutrients. Macronutrients are absolutely essential. The other 4 children, they did have a greater supply of macronutrients because Joseph and Lemoy had not gone full bore into the diet. Remember, in the beginning, they were eating pizza and going to Pizza Hut, and as they read more books, they decided, wow, this is a great diet, and it's so great we're going to impose it upon the other children. To suggest, as defense counsel suggested, I believe yesterday, that you couldn't tell that the children were unhealthy. Well, all of the children were noticeably unhealthy, and had the parents taken the children to a doctor even once, a pediatric checkup every 6 months, every year even, they would have known for sure that these children were suffering from severe malnutrition.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of emails, people saying, what about the state of Florida and baby well checks? That's a problem. This baby was not brought to a pediatrician, did not receive any medical attention. She was born at home and didn't see a doctor, of course, until the autopsy, and by then, of course, it's too late. We're going to take a quick break. Lots more to discuss on this case. Great emails. Thanks so much to our viewers. Stay with us. Welcome back to Both Sides. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle Newsome. Well, the last witness during the evidence phase of this case is now on the stand. This is the end of Dr. Renard Mote's testimony. Remember, he performed the autopsy on the victim and came to the conclusion that Woya Andreessen died from malnutrition. He is still on cross-examination.
Can air distend the abdomen?
Yes.
Did you place in your report anywhere that you found regurgitation and aspiration?
Regurgitation, aspiration, no. I did say, let me refer to the autopsy report.
Doctor, I didn't ask you that.
No, I am. But aspiration, I look with the naked eye.
I'm getting better.
The bronchi are patent. Her airways are clear with the naked eye. I have good eyes too. I've got Mr. Magoo eyes. I can't see you across the room, but I can look up close like this. I'm very good at that. She didn't have food in her airways with the naked eye at autopsy. When people die of aspiration, you see chunks of food in their airways. She didn't have chunks of food.
Do you know how many years of experience Dr. Maricini has?
No.
Do you feel that you're better qualified to render an opinion than he is?
Objection.
Sustained.
Okay. You say when you saw Woya, it was obvious that she had lost weight. Is that right?
Yes.
And I'm asking you, where did she lose the weight? How did she lose the weight? And when did she lose the weight?
I have to rely on hearsay to answer that.
Thank you, that's all I had.
Mr. Barrar, cross-examination.
All right. Doctor, is it your testimony that you would have allowed our office to come over and go through your files and meet with you outside the presence of Mr. Walker?
Yes, I did that with the other attorneys that represented the parents before both of you represented the parents.
All right,
In
speaking
fact,
of-
one of the attorneys was here this morning. He met you and introduced himself to you. And that's routine for medical examiners. That's what we did in the Miami office. Both sides have equal access to us.
That's right. That's the facts. Well, when we return, all the evidence is in and all that remains in the courtroom are closing arguments. First up will be defense attorney Ellis Rubin. But before we get to that, let's check in with Amanda Grove in the Court TV News Center with the rest of the day's legal news. When the defendant's fifth baby was born, she weighed 7 pounds. And 6 months later, when Woya Andreessen died, she weighed 6.9 pounds, less than her birth weight. So welcome back to Both Sides. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle Newsome. And not only had the defendant's daughter not gained any weight since birth, Woya Andreessen was also 6 pounds less and 2 inches shorter than the lowest medically appropriate percentile for a 6-month-old baby, according to the medical examiner's report. And in opening statements, prosecutor Herb Walker told the jury that 99% of the world's children were bigger than the victim. So how will the defense counter this information? Well, in the courtroom now, defense attorney Ellis Rubin is going to try as he gives his closing argument to the jury.
This case didn't start with the death of Woya on May 15th, 2003. It started when there were complaints of Mrs. Anderson's lifestyle and how she was handling her children. The complaints were made to the Florida Department of Children and Families. They send inspectors with the power of removing the children immediately if they saw that there was something that would cause great bodily harm to the children or anything else. In 2 of those visits, we learned that inspectors came to the apartment unannounced They talked to Lemoyne. They looked at the children. They looked at the food. They looked at the care. And they decided there's nothing here. And there was no action taken. Moya died on May 15th. Well, it was way late in May 14th before they pronounced her dead at the hospital on May 15th. A few days before that, somebody had phoned in a complaint to DCF. This is all testimony that you've heard. And they sent out an inspector, Tiffany Hunter, and you heard her testify. You've heard her say, well, I looked around and I decided after talking to the mother that as a precaution, she ought to take the children to a doctor. Moya wasn't there because she was out of the home with her father. The next day, Lemoyne called Tiffany Hunter, and instead of saying, hey, I'm not going to go see a doctor, she asked for a little delay because she had a lot to do, but she was going to take the 4 children to a doctor, although they had never been sick a day in their lives. So that was on May the 12th or 13th. A couple of days before that, on May 10th, you heard the lady who came before you, the 62-year-old fountain of youth, Mrs. Hardin, I believe her name was. She had become friendly with the family. She visited the family on May the 10th. She saw baby Moya, perfectly normal, perfectly all right. Did the state produce anybody, any neighbor, any
Sustaining the way that's seen.
You didn't hear any evidence from the state that there were people concerned in the neighborhood. And you didn't hear them testify because they were non-existent.
All right, that's Ellis Rubin giving his closing argument. Let's go to Dean Rosado. I want to talk about the other baby, because while they were in house arrest, they had actually another baby girl. What happens with her?
That's right, and part of whatever the plan is, depending on what the verdict is here, what the judge will do in these cases, just as a side, is I've found that just kind of observing these cases that the judges don't really like to impose incarceration if they can help it, because they really feel like it takes the parents away from the children and really doesn't accomplish the goal of the criminal justice system. What I think is interesting is that under the supervision, this new baby did live with them for 90 days, was taken from them, is living with a family friend, but she's allowed to breastfeed, and there's visitation, it apparently is, between the mother and child, which makes me think that they might be looking to some sort of reunification with the baby, and if the conditions can be reached with the other children as well. So I think that's a hopeful sign.
All right, so we'll talk about that. And we have so many emails here. Elaine from New York says, are there many cases of parents being brought to court, criminally speaking, over malnutrition?
Well, I really was not aware of many. There was one in Massachusetts, and I believe Court TV actually covered that case. A husband and a wife were prosecuted for, in essence, the same type of conduct.
Yes.
The starving or the malnutrition of the baby based upon the religious beliefs of a particular cult that they were involved in. There was another case in
that was
Brooklyn.
the Robideau case.
The Robideau case, yeah. I remember seeing that on Court TV, and I remember thinking, wow, that's very similar to my case. In Brooklyn, New York, I believe that the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office prosecuted a case not where the child died, but where the child suffered injury, and I believe they charged it as some type of aggravated assault or first-degree assault. I believe in New Jersey there may have been one case as well where similar facts. I don't recall whether or not the child died in that case, but I do remember that it was something to do with malnutrition based upon the deprivation of food to a child from the parents.
See, what I think is so, to me, probative in this case is the condition of the other 4 surviving children, that they were so malnourished as well. It just wasn't some kind of aberrant situation that occurred with baby Woya due to a congenital birth defect.
Right.
You have conclusive proof across the board with all the children that they were not being properly nourished. That's what I think will prove to be compelling to a jury. We have another question. During the time the children lived with their Aunt Mary, what type of diet did they follow? And if returned to their parents, will the children be returned to the type of diet discussed during this trial? And that question is from Karen in Alabama.
Well, Karen, that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked that question because there's been so much talk during the trial about tacos and Aunt Mary. The children were asked by me, what is your favorite food? And they said tacos. But that's not what Aunt Mary is feeding them. In fact, Aunt Mary is feeding them a well-rounded group of meals with fruits, vegetables, roasted potatoes, pasta, rice, beans, and even meat. There's beef, there's chicken, there's fish. And I had the opportunity to watch the children when I first met them. I had an opportunity to watch them eat lunch and to eat dinner, and they consumed it with no prodding from Aunt Mary. They ate it right up. They also consumed dairy products. So
what happens, though, Herb, if I can interrupt you for a second, real quickly, when this case is over, perhaps hypothetically speaking, if they were to be returned to their parents at some time, no control over the situation, is there?
Well, I think that based upon the depth of which the wife certainly holds her views on the raw food vegan diet, to the extent that what happened to baby Woya happened, I think it's unlikely that the parents would change their way of thinking and now say, well, we're going to let you decide what you want to eat, and we're not going to impose it. So my fear, I think, and it's a reasonable fear,
that'll happen again.
that, yeah, this is going to happen again. It's just a question of how long it's going to take for it to happen again.
That's the disturbing part of this case. They said they would rather go to trial and risk jail than feed their children some more nutrients. That's an issue here. All right, we're going to go back into the courtroom as Ellis Rubin continues his closing argument.
So what happened? That's the preliminary. There's more preliminary. Lemoy had 5 children, the 4 previous children and Woya. She fed all of the children the same way. But let's look specifically at the child that preceded Woya, Ryan, a little girl who by that time was maybe 15, 18 months old. Like Woya, the evidence shows that Lemoy stopped breastfeeding Roya and Lemoy and Woya at about the same time, after 3 or 4 months. And then she gave the babies, both of them, the same formula made up of coconut juice and almond nut juice and wheatgrass stirred in there. And Roya had no trouble at all. So she had the experience of going through that when she stopped breastfeeding Woya. She put Woya on the same formula, and everything was fine. Until one night, May the 14th, the baby was on the floor, the parents were doing the laundry, it was late at night, and all of a sudden the father noticed that the baby was struggling breathing. He rushed over, and she stopped breathing. Lemoy, call 911. Or he called 911 himself. We don't know because we didn't hear that call. It should have been brought to you, but it wasn't.
Objection. Sustained.
It wasn't brought to you.
Objection, yes. Sustained.
If things are equally available, you cannot comment that one side is not doing it.
But they did call 911.
It's
All
the
right,
thing.
I won't argue with the court. That's a good way to lose the case. 911 was called, and 911 responded by sending a Homestead police officer, who was the very first witness in this case, from the Homestead Police Department. He arrived at the apartment, knocked on the door, gained entrance. What did he see? He saw a father on his hands and knees trying to give the little baby CPR.
Overruled, the jury relying on recollection of the testimony.
On his hands and knees trying to give CPR. And he looked up at the policeman and said, "Can you help me? Can you help me?" And Lemoy, when she saw the policeman, oh, thank God.
All right, now Mr. Rubin knows better than that. He could have introduced the 911 tape. All right, what is true justice in this case? We'll hear what you had to say about that as we reveal the answer to our email question of the day right after this break. Stay with us. Kyle, thanks for that great answer, Lynn. You sure are inspirational. All right, love your children, feed your children, make sure that they are safe. We've got a few moments here left to talk to our two great guests, and I'm going to go to Dean Rosado to talk about the welfare of the surviving child, and also how did the system fall apart? Could this death of baby Woya have been prevented?
Yeah, I think it's important to put everything in perspective. We hope that these children now they're stronger, they're healthier. But the real question is all the folks in the criminal justice system did their jobs. The prosecutor, the defense, really admirable. But the point really is that a baby died. Is there any way that we could have the system? Could it have been if that worker had followed up the next day to make sure that she had seen the baby? Would that have prevented her death? That's really the question that we have to ask ourselves and try to prevent the death the next time, not clean up afterwards.
Yeah, and we had an email from Joan in Petaluma, California, asking about the Florida State Offices of Child Protection. And there were, Professor Rosado, 4 separate times, I guess, they went out to check on the child. But in the last time, they didn't even see baby Woya. And of course, then she died shortly thereafter. It seems, I mean, those are really big cracks in the system where how can a child, fall through the cracks? And not only that, with the new baby that was born. They actually went 3 months because they forgot to go ahead and petition to have that baby removed, the child that was conceived when they were under house arrest. I mean, and this is after we've already seen one baby die. They leave another baby who's being raised on that diet for 3 months before they remove. How does this happen?
Well, I don't know how that happens. In other cases, what they've done is they've actually taken those new babies from the mother at birth. They've been at the hospital. Basically, the Department of Social Services takes the baby. But there are failures in the system. It's overloaded all over the place. You have to also, you can't second guess all the time. You try to make a judgment as a caseworker. And I know Florida, like many other states, is trying hard to make these systemic changes so these types of cases don't happen again.
And that's what we want. So this is a discussion to encourage proactive behavior and revamping of the system so these problems don't happen again, because this death could have been prevented and should have been prevented on a variety of levels, first starting with the people that are most culpable, and that's the 2 parents, and you go from there. Herb, I want to talk to you about this. Perhaps was there a little inexperience or something in terms of dealing with this particular case?
The DCF worker that went to the home the day before the death, I believe, was about 22 years of age, maybe younger, when she went there. Certainly, she went to the home and she did ask to see baby Woya.
Sure.
I can't really hold her responsible for the fact that she wasn't allowed to go in through the front door and was told to go around the back door. And when she went around to the back door, baby Woya was now missing. That can't be attributed to her, but as to whether or not more follow-up should have been done the next day, certainly that could have been helpful if a visit was made the next day. What occurred the next day, of course, was a phone call was made by Lemoy saying, I'm going to take the child that you saw to the hospital, but I need more time because I want to take him to a natural doctor, and DCF allowed more time for them to do that.
Well, and it just seems, this is my opinion, just very duplicitous in that they could could have showed the baby to the worker there and didn't. Why didn't they? Because that shows me knowledge on their part that they knew that baby was not thriving, that the baby was not well and needed medical attention, and they could get in trouble for it. So it's very disturbing to me that people would put their own beliefs selfishly ahead of the well-being of their child. I find it to be unacceptable, and being a parent is a privilege, not a right to go ahead and abuse and malnourish a child like that, let alone the other 4 children. It's very disturbing, and I think you're to be commended for bringing the case forward to create the attention so that people can understand these issues and it can be prevented in the future. And I have a question for you from Fran in Cortland Manor, New York. If the Andreessens are in fact sent to prison and they get some jail time, will they be allowed to have a vegan diet, or will they be subjected to the typical menu offered to all inmates?
That would be a Department of Corrections issue, but it's my understanding that special needs individuals would in fact be accommodated. I think that a vegan diet in a prison setting is not an unreasonable request, and certainly inmates who have diabetes and need medication or some other condition and have particular religious beliefs, those beliefs are adhered to, and I don't think that it would be a problem at all for a vegan diet to be provided to someone who had a sincere desire to have that diet for health reasons. So that's not an issue.
If in fact when they're sentenced, if they get any kind of sentence, conviction in this case, would you ask for education and training or any kind of specific education for the parents with respect to feeding the other children in case the family's reunited?
Well, that certainly is an important question, and with regards to the fact that sentence is just a couple of weeks away, I'm going to stand down from any particular details as to what the state will be looking for on sentence, but certainly the parents did not provide the nutrition available. I don't believe, based upon the testimony I've heard, it's because of a lack of knowledge. I believe it's because they have a certain set belief about raw foods versus non-raw foods that's not going to change regardless of how many classes you send a person to or how many social workers talk to the parents. I believe...
Or any time that they get, if in fact they're convicted at all, that you don't think it's going to change their mind?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, I do want to take this opportunity to say goodbye to Jennifer Rosado. It's been a pleasure, as always, having you with us here today, a real treat. And of course, to my very special guest here on set, Herb Walker, came all the way from Florida to spend some time with us and our viewers today. Thanks so much, Herb.
Kimberly, thank you for inviting me from Miami.
Real pleasure. Thank you. All right, well, that wraps up our time with you today on Both Sides. But coming up next, closing arguments with Ricky Kleeman. She's in for Nancy Grace, and she'll have more coverage of the Andreessens trial, including the verdict in this case. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle Newsome. Vinnie Paultan will be back here on Monday on Both Sides with live coverage of the sentencing of Joseph Smith, the man convicted of murdering 11-year-old Carly Bruscia. Will Smith be sentenced to death for his crimes? Please tune in to find out. And until then, thanks for watching today. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
The evidence will show that each one of the parents derogated, violated that sacred duty, and as a result of that violation, 4 of their children suffered severe malnutrition, and their youngest child, a 6-month-old, died as a result of their negligence.
Today we will bring you the verdict as a jury determines whether or not this Florida couple starved their 6-month-old daughter to death. Good afternoon and welcome to Closing Arguments. I'm Ricky Kleeman, sitting in this week for Nancy Grace. And as you know, I am so excited to be back in New York City. It's Thanksgiving time. It's a wonderful time to be here in this anchor chair and be with all of you this week. Well, as I mentioned at the end of the day, we are going to show you the verdict in this very complex and controversial case.